Right, next, Mr. Darren Edwards. Darren, I keep trying to remember how we met because it wasn't that long ago, and it feels like I've known you forever considering we've just come back from Iceland and been through some pretty interesting situations and seen probably quite a lot of each other considering we've only known each other for a short period of time. Won't go into too much detail there. But Darren was, I'm not going to tell you Darren's story, but effectively a friend, we had a mutual friend, Niall McCann, and he said, look, you've got to meet this guy. He's an absolute hero. And he was raving about him to the point where I thought he fancied you. And I was like, what's this all about? Anyway, went for a coffee with Darren, and I fancy him too now. So, Darren, over to you, mate.
Oh, yeah. Cheers, buddy. Cool. That's probably the favourite intro I've ever had, so thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name's Darren, and I'm really honoured to talk about being an adaptive adventurer. And I think to touch on what Steve was talking about there, the three words on the screen behind me, strength through adversity. I think one thing that I really love about the adaptive adventurer sort of community is there's a genuine consensus that it's not the adversity that's faced that defines who we are as people. It's the actions, the accountability that we take to improve our future, whether that's a condition that you're born with, something that happens out of the blue that you don't expect. And certainly for me, my journey into adaptive adventure wasn't intended in the slightest. But like I say, is it the adversity and the challenge that you face, or is it the way that you step up? And when you're in a wheelchair, you realise how many phrases involve things like step up, best foot forward, all of that kind of stuff. So I spend half my time saying no pun intended after I say something like that. But for me, my life was on quite a clear trajectory. I kind of knew what formed me as a person, and a huge part of that was climbing and mountaineering. It wasn't the fact I was a civil servant that kind of defined me as a person. It was a love for the mountains, a love for climbing. And, in the build-up to my accident, I'd gone through the selection process to join the Special Forces Reserve, and then the training process that followed that. So for me, life was kind of headed in a direction where I was actually close to fruition on some of these plans that had been laid years earlier. And, I kind of knew where I wanted to go. And then one day I was climbing a place quite aptly named, which was called World's End, that probably a few people in the room might have climbed at some point in their lives. Limestone cliff, about an hour from where I live in Llangollen. And I'm climbing with my best friend, a guy called Matt. And we spend the day doing various routes until it's time for one final route to finish at the top. The entire day, Matt talks about one thing, and that's Tinder. He was going on a first day that night, so we were kind of trying to get things done prompt and get home so he could get showered, changed, and go out on this date. A date that would never happen, unsurprisingly. So it's that one final route that would be the pitch that would change my life. And it wasn't that I fell during the climb itself. I got to the top, and it was only when I was stood at the top and I looked back over my left shoulder to Matt, who was 35 foot below me, that the 4-foot section by 2 foot of limestone rock collapsed underneath me. And before I knew it, I was, falling from the top of World's End to potentially, 120, 150 foot below me. And in the 3 to 4 seconds of falling, I did genuinely think that was it. The chances of me surviving I knew were slim. And I think for the first time in my life, I was acutely aware of everything that I was about to lose. Friends, family, relationships, dog, whatever it might be. And it put life into perspective for the first time. And I think there's a huge irony that I needed to be in a position where I was about to lose everything to really appreciate everything for the first time. But I land flat on my back on the ledge that was probably about 6 foot wide, where Matt was stood to my side. But I hit the ledge with enough momentum that I didn't stop, I kept rolling. And I can quite honestly say, had Matt reacted maybe even half a second or a second slower, I'd have already been gone off that ledge and continued falling, and I would not be on stage with Ed and Steve tonight. I can quite, clearly, honestly say that. But in the seconds that followed after Matt kind of jumped on me on the edge of that ledge, I knew pretty much instantaneously that I was pretty badly injured. One of the first things you're obviously going to try and do is stand up in that scenario and kind of brush yourself off. And it was as I went to stand up that I suddenly realised there was a disconnect between anything below my chest and my brain. As hard as I tried, nothing would move, I wouldn't feel anything, pain started to kick in. And I'm on the ledge for about an hour before mountain rescue turn up and start to kind of assess the situation and come up with a plan for how the hell they're going to extract me from, this sort of precarious ledge on World's End. The picture on the right turned up on Twitter the day of my accident. I didn't see it, honestly, on the day of my accident. I saw it about a week later when I was coming out of intensive care. And I've used the word before, perspective, but when I saw that image, I realised once again how fortunate I'd been. Ed's book is called Lucky. And in Ed's book, he talks about how people find it weird that he was saying how lucky he was. And when I read Ed's book, there was so much of Ed's story that I could feel in mine, because I felt so damn lucky that, Matt had got to me as quick as he had, and that, I would get to see all of those people again that I thought I never would. But it was on that ledge in the 2 to 3 hours that we had to wait before I was airlifted by the Coast Guard helicopter that I made the single most important commitment to myself of my life. Now, I'm the sort of person that on New Year's Eve will say, next year I'm going to learn the guitar, and then 12 months later, still can't play the guitar. So for me to make a promise in that moment, which was, whatever this is, don't let it beat you, was pretty ambitious. But it is a commitment I've remembered and taken accountability for every single day that followed. And the days that followed weren't easy. Going through a 9-hour surgery, coming around the next day to be told that I'd, without being too gruesome, snapped my back in 2 pieces and severed my spinal cord. And the doctors doctors don't sugarcoat, we all know that, was that I would never walk again. I was paralyzed from the chest down. Come to terms with it, accept it, and focus on creating a new life. There is no going back, there's only going forward. And I remember at the time thinking that was a little bit savage, because I wanted a bit of sugarcoating. I wanted that, carrot on the end of the stick of, if you work hard enough, things might change. But actually being told that there was no chance of that and that I had to focus on creating a new life was a real bit of, I think, a gem of advice, really, because it did make me focus on all of the things that I could still do. It was someone like Karen Dark that Steve mentioned, who was injured, I think, 20 years ago and had done some phenomenal things, even though she's in a wheelchair, that made me think, there's no reason I can't do those things. There's no reason I can't go on to do some stuff. The picture on the right is me and Matt the first time. So you do 6 weeks of bed rest, lying flat on your back, letting your spine heal. Incredibly frustrating 6 weeks where you want to start taking accountability for improving your situation, but you've just got to wait. And it was in that kind of weeks and months that followed, so I was in hospital for nearly 5 months, that day by day you take more control back of your life, you take more accountability back. And, like Steve was talking about that curve of acceptance, by no means was it easy to remember that commitment made on that ledge. But I did remember it every day, through the good moments, through the bad moments. And it was coming towards the end of my rehab that I kind of thought, right, well, when I leave hospital, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? I didn't want to lose that adventurous side to life because it was the side to life that I loved most. So I asked for a day release, a bit like a prisoner on good behaviour, and it was granted. So me and Matt drove up to Manchester, about 2 hours away, and I went and spent every penny that I'd saved from living in hospital for 5 months on something that I'd never done before in my life, and I bought a kayak. And all the gear to go with it, the guy in the store saw that I had an NHS wristband on and joked that, you're not still a patient, are you? And I was like, yep, I am. And I went back to hospital and told everybody my grand plan for the future. The physios laughed and said, maybe think more wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis. But I was like, no, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to recapture and rediscover adventure in a different way. And I was discharged on the 23rd of December. On the 24th of December, my incredible friends and family had booked the local leisure centre for 2 hours to set me off on this new journey for the first time. And I cannot tell you how rubbish I was at kayaking. So when you're paralysed at the chest level, you've obviously got no core muscles and no leg muscles, both of which turn out, didn't know that at the time, but quite handy when it comes to kayaking. So I think we counted about 25 capsizes in 2 hours, but every capsize made me more determined to make it work. And failure after failure, I got a little bit further into that pool before I'd fall in, a little bit further into that pool before I'd fall in. And it was just the start of this new, exciting journey, focusing on all the things I still could do, not focusing on the things that I would maybe have to leave in the past. And this picture I love because it's taken 4 months after I leave hospital, and it's the day I turn up at Nottingham to trial for Great Britain's Paralympic kayaking team. The guy assessing me takes this picture, and I think he's like, yep, we've got someone young, fit, determined, this is going to be good. And I push off very gingerly from the side, and before I get anywhere near off the screen, I'm already in. At which point he said, right, do you want to go get a shower and get into some warm clothes? And you know, in his head, he was like, this guy's awful. And I was like, no, let's, get me back out and push me back in. And he did. And I got a little bit further to off the screen, fell in again. And then at the end of the day, he sat me down in the office. I did get that warm shower at some point. And he said, Darren, if I'm completely honest, what we didn't see is natural talent. But what we saw are the kind of raw qualities that we actually want, which is determination, grit, resilience, stubbornness. It's great when stubbornness becomes a good quality, isn't it? And that became the start of my journey as an athlete, unexpected, a bit like Steve as well. Never thought I'd be an athlete as a career, but that was the start of me chasing a new dream of going to the Tokyo Paralympics. But a big part of the journey was also saying goodbye, and it sounds a bit cliched, a bit cheesy, but it was closing one chapter with a bit like a relationship ending, isn't it? Sometimes it's the closure that you need that allows you to move on, and for me, it was going up halfway up Snowdon with a good friend of mine sat in the front row, taking a picture of his own picture that he took. Sorry, Josh. I didn't realise that would be quite as embarrassing as it was. I love you, dude. But Josh knows that was my way of saying goodbye and saying, thank you for the memories. The first mountain I walked up as a teenager was Snowdon, so to go back and just, say, I'll see you in another life was really, touching for me.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then make sure to like and subscribe to the Kendal Mountain YouTube channel. And to see more amazing adventure content, then check out the Kendal Mountain Festival player, where you can also watch the full adaptive adventure session with Darren Edwards. And to check out more details, click the link in the description below.